Welcome to Mistakes Well Handled, where real people share real mistakes and the lessons that actually matter. Mistakes Well Handled is a 30-minute conversation built on three truths: regret, what went wrong, revelation, what it taught, and reality, how it changed life or work. We explore one professional mistake and one personal mistake, hearing the unsanitized stories from leaders within the industrial space. Today, I am super excited to introduce you to our next guest. This one I've been looking forward to. Known Tom for a little while now, and I've always found him to be a super interesting and insightful guy. And I think any of our viewers are going to share that opinion. So I am very excited, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tom Monaghan, who has been a leader in the safety and environmental and sustainability space for many years now. Currently in the role at Water Mushrooms, leading their efforts in that area. Yeah, love for you to say hello, Tom, and say a little bit about yourself and perhaps how you found yourself in this industry that you're in.
How are you, Ty? And thanks for that introduction there. So I'm Tom Monaghan. I have worked in health and safety, sustainability, environmental management since the mid-90s. I've done some other stuff in between, some operations management, quality management as well. And I sort of went off course for a while. I mean, how did I find myself here? I found myself here by accident at the start. It certainly wasn't planned. I think it's something we'll probably get into as we go along, but it was let's call it a happy mistake, if you want to, that I ended up here. But I have ended up here, and I find the health and safety field interesting for many reasons, but mostly centered around people. So I have tended over the years to try work in industries that aren't the highly regulated farm industry, sort of med device, just simply because the paperwork side of things doesn't really excite me. So I'm like boots on the ground, health and safety.
Yep.
That's my thing. Way more than the sit down and tick a box. Don't get me wrong, I understand that has to be done too. But I know my limitations, and I know life in a small office doing paperwork wouldn't have been for me. A lot of health and safety roles, that can be the role. So I suppose I just wanted it to be different than that, and to do the role, but in a slightly different manner. And I think that's how I got here. I mean, I can talk you through from the start. But seeing as I started in the early to mid 90s, quite some conversation.
I mean, it doesn't feel that long ago, actually, the 90s, but yeah, I can definitely relate. So in terms of sort of where you're from, where did you grow up?
I'm from Wexford in Ireland, and I still live in Wexford in Ireland. I live about a mile from the house I grew up in.
Oh, amazing.
I have traveled. I've traveled all over the world. I took one entire year off when I was 40 to travel the world. I've always enjoyed holidays, and myself and my wife decided at that point that we'd have an extended holiday for a year, and we went to see all the places we ever wanted to see. Well, most of them. I still enjoy a holiday, but that was good. But I've always, it's just, I suppose I'm a home bird.
Yeah, home is where home is, right? And I think I'm going to circle back on those travel plans. I think all that travel experience. So definitely dive into that a little more, but just giving you a sense of what our podcast is about. Obviously, from the discussion that we really try to focus on how we can provide insights to people based on the stories, but primarily around mistakes that professional leaders have made in their personal and professional lives that have shaped them as to who they are today. Really, so just kind of diving into that, working through what a personal mistake would be. Is there one that comes to mind? Is there a personal mistake that you've made outside of work that you feel that's really shaped you as a leader?
There was, Ty, certainly. And when we had the pre-discussion, then I tried to think of what personal mistake. We all make personal mistakes. And I suppose for me, the biggest personal mistake, which became a career, or could have become a career mistake, was education. So when I was in school, I had no interest in it. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to leave. This would have been the mid 80s. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get a job. I just wanted to earn some money. Didn't really care. Didn't study. Didn't do anything. So I did stay in school until the end, but I left with zero qualifications, none whatsoever, with the plan being to go to Germany and work on a building site. I was going to lay blocks, and that was the plan. That was what I had in my mind. That's what I didn't need school. I'm going to lay blocks for the rest of my life. So I left school, like I said, without much in the way of qualifications. And the guy that was going to accompany me to Germany, there was two of us. He decided not to. He
Mm.
wasn't going. I wasn't brave enough to go on my own, so I got a job locally. So I've now gone into a job in a factory. I'm on the end of a conveyor belt with no hope, I suppose, of doing anything else because I wasn't qualified to.
Interesting.
Nothing in the way of qualifications, and nothing to prove that I could do anything. So it was like, okay, now I'm here. So I would say the biggest mistake I made in my personal life when I was younger was that.
Interesting.
Thinking I had my future planned out,
Yeah.
when in actual fact it was a kernel, a nugget of a plan that there was no real thought behind, and I hadn't thought through well, what happens if this fails? What else will I do?
Yeah.
I had put all my eggs in one basket. So yeah, that made for an interesting journey to to where I ended up. Not that I'm not king of the world or anything, but it's been a journey to get from leaving school with no qualification to being the group sustainability and safety manager.
Well, I mean, it's clearly testament to all the hard work you've put in. Because I feel like if you have, that sort of journey where you feel like you've, restricted yourself with that choice, and you've had to then find a way forward, it must have been a real slog, I guess, right, to really move forward. Or, how would you describe that? Did you feel like it was a much more heavy lift as a result? Or
It's definitely a heavy lift to have to do your education whilst also working, because I now had a job and I needed a job,
Mm.
but I also needed an education. I was really blessed in that within probably the first year of what was simply the worst job in the world. I worked in a factory that made lenses. I worked on the end of a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Everything that came down had chemicals on it, liquid chemicals. It was messy.
Yeah.
You're talking 88, 80.
Yeah.
Standards weren't the same.
Yeah.
No breaking the law or anything, but standards just weren't the same. And it was a horrible job. But there was a manager in that particular factory. He was actually the plant chemist.
Okay.
Who was really, really nice guy, really a guy who was really generous with his time, and a guy he was 20 odd years older than me.
Yeah.
The plant chemist. I was new in the door. There was
Yeah.
600 people working in the factory, but I got talking to him, and we sort of got a bit of rapport going. And over time, he began to find out I was interested. He became a mentor. He tutored me in chemistry.
Interesting.
So he was the plant chemist, but his sideline was that he was also a health and safety manager, which is where the health and safety connection comes in.
Now it's
So
all together. Yeah.
so he started to tutor me and stuff in the chemistry of what we did, because in this big factory there was what they called the chemical side. So first thing he tutored me, then he got me a job out on the chemical side.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of years out there, he got me a supervisor's, I got up to supervisor's position because I was now doing the courses. I was learning the stuff. I was learning what happened. Again, like I said, he was doing it, we used to clock off at 5 o'clock, and then we'd sit either in the canteen or in an office, and he'd go through stuff with me up maybe 7 o'clock. And I went away, I took exams. So he tutored me through some stuff like the ASQ, the American Society of Quality.
Mm.
He pushed me, he prodded me along to go and get my qualifications in health and safety from UCD. So yeah, he was like my mentor for years there. He became my direct manager then at one point. And then when he left, obviously I couldn't take over as the plant chemist because I wasn't a chemist.
Right. Yeah.
But when he left, I took over as the environmental and safety manager of the factory. Now, I worked there for 20 years, so it was the last maybe 6 years of it where he was gone. But the previous 14 years, he mentored me the whole way.
It's super interesting how when you speak to leaders who are sort of where they want to be in their career, the impact that either one or two individuals have
Hmm.
had on the trajectory of their careers. Yeah, it's just fascinating, right? I mean, it's this idea of sort of a master and a pupil, or a mentor and a mentee, and what just that one interaction and relationship can do to the whole trajectory of your career. I mean, I totally get it now. I can see why,
I learned so much from that man. Not, and I mean outside of the educational side of it,
yeah,
outside of the environmental stuff and the health and safety stuff. Some of the things I learned how to be a manager
mm,
for a start.
yeah,
I learned when you needed to talk to people, how you needed to talk to people,
yeah,
how to treat people,
yeah,
because he would, at the time, the culture around management would have been very much a them and us.
mm,
It wouldn't have been a
yeah,
collaborative thing
yeah,
so much. And he broke that mold entirely. He was, even as the chemist, he was quite happy to sit down and discuss the chemistry of something with you, hear what you thought,
yeah,
and then explain to you either why what you thought was wrong, and this is why, and he would show you. Or on a very odd occasion, he would talk to somebody and say, you know what, I hadn't thought that that might do that, or this might affect that. Let me go back and look at that again. Whereas the culture at the time would have been very much, I'm the plant chemist,
yeah,
do as I say.
yeah. No, interesting.
So yeah, he taught me an awful lot about being a person, being a man, more than just being a manager,
Yeah.
but actually how to deal with people in an empathetic, um, in a human way.
But that actually leads on to my next question. You may have answered it, in fact, but I was gonna ask how you feel that that experience broadly has kind of changed the way that you treat other people, perhaps, direct reports or colleagues, or just, in the entirety of your career, how you feel that shaped the way that you treat people.
It definitely, it shaped, I would say, probably every interaction I've had, especially in a professional sense,
Yep.
ever since. There was a couple of things that he taught me. One of the things he taught me was that you can never go to something, a course, or a meeting, and not learn something.
Mm,
Everything you learn won't always be good, but you'll always learn something.
interesting.
And through that, because I've worked with many managers over the years, and I've learned from every one of them, but I've equally learned as many times of the things not to do
Mm,
as I have the things to do. I always fall. He's sort of my default position. So Martin is his name, but I'd always fall back and think, "Wait, how would Martin have dealt with that? Is that an interaction that Martin would have allowed?
yeah.
And I still do it even now. I still do it to this day, and it served me well. And I think the reason for that is he wasn't a soft man, but
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
he could be hard, he could be stern, he
Yeah.
could be all those things when he needed to be,
Yeah.
but he wasn't it just for fun.
Yeah.
I learned exactly the same thing from that you don't always have to be the boss. It's not important that people always know that you're the boss.
Yeah.
Let the people who know what they're talking about talk,
Mm.
and then you can interject when you need to.
Yeah, I think there's a really, really valuable lesson there, actually, in sort of the power of others' insights. And actually, I guess, as a leader, you want to just put together the best people so that they can do
Yeah,
their best work and kind of get out of their way. So that's really interesting. I really love the fact that you almost think of Martin as like a framework or a mental model. It's almost like Martin's law. What would Martin do in this
absolutely. Yeah,
situation? I love that.
yeah. And I've used it even over the years. So in different places that I've worked,
Yeah,
I've come across people who were a bit like I was then,
yeah,
and they're frustrated. You can see it. They're really well capable,
yeah,
but they're in a job that's not using their talents or skills, and an internal position will come up. And when people are saying, well, we should advertise this and we should advertise that, and I'll always say, well, what have we got internally? Who have we got that can do this? Have you thought of X, Y, Z? And like there's a guy that I used to work with who worked in goods outwards. He worked in our goods outwards, basically closing up packages and putting them onto a pallet and sticking them onto a truck. And he is now the head buyer planner
Interesting.
for a company that sells windows and doors. And that was based on, I had a conversation with him when he was packing boxes, and he was telling me what people were doing wrong when it came to stuff coming in, because he was seeing it coming in and going out. And
Yeah.
he's like, why do they do this? And I was saying, well, what would you do differently? And he had all these ideas. I spoke to one of the other managers who agreed with me. A position came up, a quite junior position came up as a planner, and we just said to him, would you like to have a go? And he said, well, what if it doesn't work out? I said, if it doesn't work out, go back to your job. But if it does work out, then this is your job,
Yeah.
you know. And now he's moved on from that company to a different company, and he's their head buyer planner.
That's really, really interesting. I feel like there's this like sort of unspoken rule that if you've been mentored in some way, you sort of want to pay it forward and also mentor others, right? And
Absolutely.
you're describing, which is like it's awesome, but it's also like super fascinating that it just happens naturally that's what you sort of want to do as well, which is really interesting. I guess just out of curiosity, is there a with that experience and even the experience mentoring this other colleague as well, is there one sort of lie that you thought about yourself before that to not be true as a result of that experience, for example?
Yeah, I would have said that the one lie, and obviously this goes back some time, but the one lie I probably would have found out about myself is I won't say you can do anything if you try, because that's not true. I couldn't have been an astronaut, for instance. But I suppose the one lie I did find is that it's not true that it's too late. You've left school, no qualifications, now it's
Yeah,
too late. That wasn't true.
yeah,
All your plans have come to nothing. You never will come to anything. That's not true. There's always time, I mean,
yeah,
I was like in my early 20s when I started proper education, as I call it,
yeah, yeah,
because my school years were just, who cared?
yeah.
There's no tomorrow. But so I was sort of in my mid or early 20s when I started proper education, and I would have believed prior to being mentored, this was my life now. I had not done the work, and this was the payback, and just get used to it.
I mean, that just says how profound that meeting with Martin was for you, because it kind
Mhm.
of changed the entire trajectory of even the way that you kind of think and what you thought was possible as well from that experience. That's really, really interesting. And I'm sure that that's something that really echoes with a lot of people. Particularly, I think in the era that you were first starting off in work, I think that's like, I suspect that is definitely the narrative that was really being pushed for people that were school leavers in particular was unless you do X, Y, and Z, there is no future for you, basically, which we all know isn't the case.
No, no, it isn't.
But yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely see how that's a lie that would have been easy to believe, certainly in the 80s and 90s, and even the early 2000s, to be fair. I think that was
Yeah,
still still quite a strong narrative, but I think it's definitely been dispelled now. So yeah, no,
I think there is something inside me where when you hear the stories of, I think Alan Sugar is probably a
yeah,
typical example, where he'll tell you, he was up, he was selling stuff down the market at 12 and
yeah,
13, and he did it, he did X and he did Y. And by the way, fair dues to him, he's a far more successful man than I am. But I personally know that how would you call it, that lonesome journey, that journey on its own
yeah,
without the mentor side of things,
yeah,
that wouldn't have been for me. I don't think, have dragged myself
yeah,
out of that like that. And there are a lot of stories of, these self-made.
yeah,
Sometimes it's okay to just say, well, I may have made it to a certain level. I
yeah.
certainly didn't do it by myself.
Do you know what's really interesting? Actually, I feel like just as a society, that's whether it's in the UK or the US or other places in the world, we do an amazing job of like romanticizing success, and we kind of hold out these individuals that we think that they literally just achieved it entirely on their own, but actually
Mhm.
when you start to dig into the stories, often they sort of they worked with, and I would say, a master, really, like someone who really taught them how to master their profession, and then they became the master as a result of that. So like many of these entrepreneurs, for example, their mentors are incredibly successful people, and either they found those mentors, it might have been whilst on that journey, but it's almost
Yeah.
like mastering a field or a profession almost requires you to learn from another master of some kind as well. So it's super fascinating, and I love your openness and sort of just honesty about it as well. That actually this individual Martin in particular shaped a lot of your early career, and even now, if you're using him as a framework there, which I
Yeah, yeah.
so that's that's really cool actually. So just kind of diving a bit deeper, then, do you think that some of these sort of challenges that you you described in terms of the journey to get to where you were, and I guess the overall mistake, how do they kind of show up today in your life? Is there anything in particular that you're kind of more careful about, or that you think about, and as a result of that experience? Or
I'd say that certainly, I mean, maybe it's the fear, I'm not sure, but I now never turn down a learning opportunity.
Hmm.
So if somebody says to me, "Do you want to attend this?"
Yeah,
Me yes every time. I never assume I already know it.
yeah,
I will go on every learning opportunity, and I think some of it is certainly that fear of, I didn't do it the first time. I'm not going to mess it up the second time.
yeah,
So that still stays with me, and I say that to people all the time.
yeah,
If somebody is offered a course in work, or they're off, whatever it might be,
yeah,
and if they say to me, "Oh, is it going to be any good? What good is it to me?"
yeah,
I always just say to them, "You go, you learn, take it in,
yeah,
and then walk away. And if you never use it, you never have to feed it. It just sits there on its own. But in 2 years' time, you could be in the middle of something, and it's like a light bulb moment where you go, I remember when I did XYZ. Yeah, now that makes sense. So yeah, one thing that 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 would have come out of that is I will never ever turn down. Currently in the middle of a master's in sustainable food production
interesting.
because somebody asked me did I want to do it, and that it was simple as that. You want to do a master's in sustainable food production? Go on then. Um, it's a ton of work, but it's interesting. Will I stay working in food forever? Possibly not. Will it matter? Absolutely not.
But it's amazing the sort of trajectory, the almost like the sort of the journey itself. You've gone from not wanting to really embrace education at all to now doing like that is the complete end of the spectrum, because a master's is really intense and like really requires a lot of dedication around education. And I think one thing that you said that I mean, many things you said have been really insightful, but one thing in particular that kind of hit home for me was this point around fear. And I think sometimes when we're young, I mean, this is my view, and just from hearing what you were describing, you feel a lot of sort of anxiety towards certain things, and it feels like you've kind of overcome that anxiety, because often anxiety causes inertia, right? It just stops you from doing stuff, even if you're capable
Yeah,
of doing it. The fear itself is like debilitating. And actually, what I'm hearing is your mentor and then your journey afterwards has actually removed, I mean, I'm sure all of us have some fear, but removed the majority of that fear from you. And now actually that this is kind of almost like your true self, right? You are actually a curious person that's really interested in learning,
yeah,
because you don't have that fear anymore.
yeah. I would say yes. I mean, there's a healthy amount of fear still exists. Hopefully, it always will.
Yeah,
But I rarely, if ever, go into something now thinking I won't be able to do it.
yeah,
I generally now go into things thinking, come on, you know, how hard can it be?
yeah,
Then sometimes turns out to be very hard, but you still push through. Whereas in the past, certainly my younger self would have
yeah.
thought that's too hard. I can't do that, and that would have stopped me. I don't let that stop me.
Hmm. That's. I mean, it's a really interesting journey. You're halfway through Mistakes Well Handled. If this conversation resonates, come join the Misconstrued community. Get direct access to our guests, no filters, no fluff. Let's get back to it. I guess just kind of moving on to our next segment, it would be great to think about or to dive into any sort of professional mistake that you've made, and just see how that kind of tops and tails with your personal mistake described and shared with us. So is there a professional mistake that sort of comes to mind?
There was something that came to mind immediately, and I'm not sure if it's typically a professional mistake or that would be discussed on here or not. But probably my biggest professional mistake was continuing to work for a company after they had changed management, where their values totally separated from my values. And I stayed there for probably 4 years after that break happened, and it practically ruined me.
Interesting. Of
It was so. I mean, I'm obviously not going to name them,
course,
but
yeah. No need to.
no, no need to whatsoever. But I was working for them for about 3 years. I had gone in there as their quality manager and health and safety, quality and health and safety, because it was a relatively small crew. So I was double jobbing, doing those two jobs, and everything was going fine. Then there was a change made at corporate level.
Okay.
So the CEO, who had been the CEO for like 30 years or so, he retired, and a new CEO came through. This company, although there was our portion of it was quite a small company, this is a global company. So he changed, new CEO came in, and their value systems seemed to change overnight. I was taken off to the US, where we were headquartered, for 2 weeks to be taught how to manage. And as I said earlier, I've never turned down a training opportunity. I didn't turn down that one. And as I said earlier on, I've learned from every single course or person I've ever met, the good and the bad. This was 2 weeks of how to manage, and there was simply no part of that 2 week course that I would have been willing to follow. For me, it was a step back. It was just the wrong approach. Everything about it screamed, this isn't going to work when I get back to Ireland. So I did that. When I came back, I changed jobs from being quality and health and safety and moved into operational management. I'm the operations manager, and then spent the next sort of 4 years fighting a personal battle against the corporation, where I wanted to manage like I manage.
Yeah.
And that was working perfectly okay. We were hitting our targets. We were doing everything. I suppose the mistake was that I stayed there and I kept fighting. When, on reflection, when I look back, you are never going to change a corporation. If a corporation decides that this is their map, this is their route, they're going to march that route. They'll find out sooner or later whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. But if it isn't the same path that you want to follow, you shouldn't stay there. You know, it affected me personally. You know, it affected my health. It affected my mental health. It affected my physical health.
Mm.
And all because I naively had the view that I could change it.
Yeah.
Um, that is certainly my biggest professional mistake. I should have gotten out as soon as I saw what was happening, because I knew it wasn't going to work for me, but I plodded on thinking it's always worked out in the past. And I think what I took from that in retrospect
Yeah.
was that sometimes it's okay to say, "No, sorry, this is no longer for me. I can't do this, not in this manner." So yeah, that was certainly I would say, my biggest professional mistake.
So what do you think kept you there then? Because obviously right now you're very kind of introspective about it, and you're, in hindsight, you feel that you could have left earlier. But what, just trying to go back to that time, because 4 years is quite a significant period of time. What
Mm.
was it that sort of kept you in that role that you understood about yourself, perhaps?
It was a small team. There was just under 40 of us. Uh, there was a management team of only 4, and I knew everybody
Mm.
in that plant by name. I knew their partners. I knew their children if they had them,
Yeah.
and I had a sense of loyalty to the people.
Mm.
But it was a sense of loyalty that the corporation didn't have to me. They didn't have to the people either, by the way. But and it was purely out of loyalty. I thought I would be failing people
Yeah.
if I walked away. And I mean, the simple fact is, I didn't. I walked away. They got a different manager, um, who did things the corporate way,
Yeah.
and the people who didn't like that left,
Yeah.
which they would have done anyway. If I had have if I had gone the corporate way, the same people would have left. And the business went on for another few years. It's since closed down, but that's neither here nor there. It wasn't
Yeah.
because of that. But yeah, it was a sense of loyalty to people. I didn't want to let people down, and in retrospect, looking back at it, I wouldn't, nobody would have looked at me and said, "You let us down." That's not how life works.
Yeah, interesting. I guess I was just to kind of pull on that thread. How has that sort of experience changed you now in the way that your outlook and the way that you think or approach things?
I promised myself then, and I've stuck to it, that I would never, ever do that again.
Yeah,
It makes interviews very interesting. I've only had a couple of interviews since then
yeah,
because I've only needed to or wanted to move jobs a couple of times. I find interviews when you're young versus interviews when you're in your mid-50s
yeah,
are very, very different animals. So when I came to work here, for instance, 2 years ago, I made it quite clear when I came in that I didn't need the job. I could
yeah,
work somewhere else,
yeah,
but I wanted it. I
yeah,
wanted to work here. But I didn't need it, and they didn't need me. Somebody else could do my job if I didn't, so that it would be done on a mutual respect basis. And when one or the other of us was no longer enjoying it, we would part ways. Simple as that.
yeah,
No animosity, no argument, no anything.
yeah,
And it's finding people who you can work with who will listen to that conversation and not take it as a threat, not
yeah,
take it as an "I will leave,"
yeah,
because that's not what you're saying.
yeah,
You're not saying, "I'll leave if you give out to me," or "I'll leave if you won't do the things I want." What I'm saying to them is, "I will leave if I don't suit this and this doesn't suit me.
yeah,
And I'm perfectly okay with you asking me to leave if this doesn't suit me and I don't suit you." And it's just having the respect of, stop looking at it on it as a sort of a business relationship, and just look on it as a sort of a personal relationship where you go, "This doesn't work anymore. Can you go away?" Or, "If I'm going to go away," and the people I work for now, I had that conversation. I came here, I did an interview which lasted an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And as I was walking out the gate, he said it was the CEO that interviewed me, and I just said to him, "Look, if you want to see me for a second interview, just let me know. But if not, it was lovely to meet you. It's fine." And he said, "I don't think we need to do a second interview. When can you start?
that's great.
You seem like you fit in."
Yeah,
And I have done, but I haven't done because of me.
yeah,
I have done because of the people that work,
yeah,
because they've got to be good people before you can fit into that. And yeah, so that's what I learned about it. I learned that, you know, look, and I don't say this in a boastful way, but I'm privileged in the fact that I live a relatively low level lifestyle. I don't want for big houses or big cars or lots of things. So any sort of decent wage is going to keep me happy. As long as I can have holidays,
yeah,
all is good in the world.
yeah,
So I recognize that from that privilege to a certain extent. I don't have dependents who are, depending on me bringing home a huge wage. There's me and my wife. My daughter is all grown up, has her own family, and my wife has a good job. So I am privileged in that, if I want to go out of there and go away and work and do something else, I can do
yeah,
that. But it's recognizing that it doesn't, a trajectory. I don't always have to be going up. If the time is right and you've got to like level off and drop back down, I parked cars for 6 months
interesting.
between jobs,
Yeah,
for €10 an hour. Didn't cost me a thought. Met some lovely people
yeah,
and learned how to park a car properly. So, I came away from that. I learned something,
yeah.
you know. Um, it was, it's just what you do. When you need to do something, just do it. Don't do something that's going to make you sick.
It's really interesting. I mean, your point around when you're young to now, being in your sort of mid-50s and thinking about the way you approach interviews, but also just the way that your perspective seems to have changed. Clearly, you have much less of the anxiety that I was kind of describing before, and that you kind of touched
Mm.
on. But also, I just think that you sound really liberated. I think a lot of people would love to be as liberated as you are too, which is, yeah, it's really powerful. It's actually a gift to kind of have that perspective, I think. So I think that's actually a really good lesson, even for myself, that I'm going to take away from this discussion is actually how do you shape a mindset where you just feel a bit more liberated about things. You also, you've got a sense of gratitude and just have the right perspective, because actually I think you're right. Like it doesn't matter sometimes, right? You're going to figure a way forward.
Yeah, it's, and again, this is something somebody said to me not so long ago. But
Yeah,
I said to them, whatever was happening in their life, I said to them, "Look, it'll work out."
yeah,
Now, I know that's not always true. Sometimes that's an inappropriate thing to say.
Mm.
But in this particular instance, it was an appropriate thing to say.
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah.
work out. It will work out.
Yeah.
And they turned around to me and said, well, I suppose, look, it's worked out 100% of times in the past.
Yeah.
And I said, exactly. So even all the other times when you didn't think it was going to work out, it did. And it'll work out this time as well. And like I said, there are occasions when that's not appropriate to say.
Yeah.
But in, I would say, 90% of cases, it is appropriate to say because it will work out. It might not work out exactly how you want it to. And it might not work out as quickly as you want it to, but it will work out and you will get back to where you're supposed to be. It's about allowing yourself that off ramp to get back to where you need to be.
Yeah. No, that's really, really interesting. Yeah, so it's a really powerful thought to sort of just consider having that kind of perspective. I like it. It's soul-bringing, but it's also like liberating at the same time as well. I guess so I could, even myself, just apply some of your thinking. Is there sort of a habit or rule that you've learned as a result of that experience that you apply? I really liked what you said about Martin earlier. Is there a similar rule that you have that perhaps isn't, related to your mentor, but related to kind of this experience that you now apply going forward, about work or even more broadly?
I think the rule I apply now, coming from that, is that I always try to be true to me
Mm.
and to my potential.
Yeah.
Now, likewise, you have to flip that because you've got to be mindful of everybody else's potential too. And you've got to be mindful of, the mind space everybody else is in at the same time. It's not all about you. None of us are the main character. Everything just goes around us.
Yeah.
Life is going on. Mine is going on. Yours is going on. Everybody else's is going on around us. You can only really control yours, but you can affect other people's.
Yeah.
But if you're true to you and your potential, and then that old adage, do no harm. So walk forward, be true to you, do the best for you, but while doing that, do no harm. Don't walk over people to do it. Walk with them, or where necessary, walk around them. Don't walk over them.
I think you may have just given us a perfect parting sentence, but my final question was actually going to be, if there was one piece of advice or in one sentence, is there a piece of advice that you would share with someone who's facing one of the mistakes or challenges that you've described today, with the view that it would help them handle that mistake or help them recover from that?
If I had to give somebody a piece of advice on that, I think it would be, it's a moment in time.
Yeah.
When there'll come a time when you look back on it as a learning experience.
Mm.
Depending on the mistake there may even come a time when you can look back on it and laugh. I think that if I was to say to somebody, what would I do? I would say reflect on it sooner rather than later. So don't let it beat you up for a long time.
Yeah.
Let it beat you up for a short time. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
Let it beat you up for a little while. It just got to be that period of, for me anyway, that period of almost internal why, where you kind of get that out of you. But reflect on it sooner rather than later. And when you reflect on it truthfully. What was your addition to the problem?
Yeah.
What did you bring to the issue? And not just what did other people bring to the issue? Because let's face it, in the story I told you, yeah, sure, the corporate, and it's easy to make corporate guys sound like the bad guys.
Mm.
I'm not perfect. Everything
Yeah.
I wanted to do isn't always right.
Yeah.
I know that about me, and that's fine. But what I should have recognized earlier was that I was never going to fit with them, and that was equal parts their fault and my fault.
Yeah.
They wanted to change me. I didn't want to be changed. I wanted to change them, and they didn't want to be changed. It's equal parts at fault there. So when it comes to that, try to recognize it sooner when it's something like that. And certainly reflect on it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So you don't beat yourself up for a long time. Sit back, think about it, think about what you could have done differently. There's little or no point in thinking about what somebody else could have done differently to you, because you can't ever change that.
Yeah.
I learned to drive when I was 36. I had no interest in it before that. And I can remember my driving instructor saying to me, I was worried about what the guy in front of us was doing. And he said to me, you're driving this car, you can't also drive that one.
Yeah.
Regardless of what he does, you drive your car to the best of your ability. And if we end up in a horrible crash, at least it wasn't your fault.
I really love that. I think my takeaway from this episode and speaking with you Well, there are many takeaways, but two things in mind are: one, it's really refreshing your perspective. I think that's actually a very liberating approach to challenges and mistakes. So I think just having a better sense of perspective is really, really important. And then also, I think certainly what you've said most recently, there feels like you're making this really clear distinction between, there are some things where you're not to blame and the blame may lie with someone else, but it's important to take on responsibility. So the blame and responsibility are distinct concepts, and you have to embrace that, is sort of what I've heard. And I think that that's really a very wise approach to things, which is that actually, you might not be to blame, but ultimately it is your responsibility. Lean into that and it will make things better for you, and it will actually help with your perspectives. Yeah, I love that. Really, really wise. I'm going to apply a lot more of that myself. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it yourself.
Oh yeah, I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have.
It's been super interesting, as I thought it would be. I think you've given us some real words of wisdom there as well. Today, we talked about mistakes, what they reveal, and how they stay with us. If conversations like this help you grow, join the Misconstrued community for members-only access to our guests and deeper conversation. Until next time.